The gunshot echoed across the plains as the stagecoach lurched violently, sending Catherine Turner tumbling against the opposite seat. Her gloved hands gripped the leather strap hanging from the ceiling as dust billowed through the windows. It was May of 1876, and what had begun as a promising journey to Rock Springs, Wyoming territory, was rapidly descending into the nightmare her father had warned her about before she'd left Boston. "Everyone stay calm," the driver shouted from above, though the panic in his voice betrayed his words. Catherine's traveling companion, a silver-haired matron named Mrs. Abernathy, clutched her reticule to her chest. "Outlaws," she whispered. "Heaven help us." The stagecoach rocked violently as it came to an abrupt halt. Catherine's heart pounded against her ribs as hooves thundered around them, and rough voices called out commands. The door was yanked open, revealing a man with a bandana covering the lower half of his face and a revolver aimed inside. "Ladies and gentlemen," he drawled, his eyes cold above the fabric, "this here's what you might call an unscheduled stop." Another masked man appeared behind him. "Get him out, Deke. We ain't got all day." Catherine's legs trembled as she was roughly pulled from the coach. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she stood beside the other passengers, Mrs. Abernathy, a traveling salesman, and a young clerk heading west for opportunity. 4 mounted men surrounded them, guns drawn. "Now," said the leader, a tall man with a shock of dirty red hair visible beneath his hat, "we'll be taking your valuables, and then you can continue on your merry way." Catherine clutched her locket, the last gift from her mother before consumption had taken her 2 years prior. The outlaws moved efficiently, collecting watches, wallets, and jewelry. When they reached her, the red-haired leader paused, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. "What's your name, miss?" he asked, his voice suddenly softer. "Catherine Turner," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Please, take what you want, but leave my mother's locket." The man's eyes flickered with something unreadable. He turned to his companions. "Change of plans, boys. We're taking the lady with us." "What?" The word escaped Catherine's lips as a horrified whisper. "Boss, we didn't agree to no kidnapping," one of the other outlaws protested. "That Turner name means something," the leader replied. "Her daddy's that railroad baron from back east. She'll fetch a good price." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. Her father's warnings about the dangers of the frontier echoed in her mind. He'd opposed her journey to become a schoolteacher in Rock Springs, but she'd been determined to forge her own path. "Please," Mrs. Abernathy begged, "leave the poor girl be." The leader ignored her, grabbing Catherine by the arm and dragging her toward his horse. She struggled, but his grip was like iron. "Let the coach go," he ordered his men. "No witnesses about where we're headed." As Catherine was hoisted unceremoniously onto the leader's horse, she caught a glimpse of the stagecoach driver slipping something to the young clerk, a folded piece of paper. Their eyes met briefly before she was turned away. "Ride," the leader commanded, and the outlaws spurred their horses, carrying Catherine away from the road and into the rugged wilderness of Wyoming territory. Miles away, Wade Parker's skilled hands worked steadily as he reshod his stallion, Midnight. At 32, Wade had seen more of life's hardships than most men twice his age. The sun had baked lines into his face, and his dark hair, grown slightly too long, curled beneath his hat. 10 years as a cavalry scout, followed by 5 as a deputy marshal, had left him with a reputation that stretched across the territory. "Wade!" The shout came from the direction of town. He straightened, watching as his friend Sheriff Thomas Doyle rode toward his small ranch at breakneck speed. "Tom," Wade acknowledged as the lawman reined in his lathered horse, "what brings you out here in such a hurry?" Stagecoach was hit about 15 miles south, Tom said, wiping sweat from his brow. Marauders took everything of value. Wade nodded grimly. Anyone hurt? No injuries, but they took a passenger. Young woman named Catherine Turner. Wade's hammer dropped to the ground. Kidnapped, seems so. Driver said it was the Delaney gang. You know their territory better than anyone. Tom's expression was grim. I've got a posse forming, but you were a tracker for the army. Thought you might want in on this. Wade was already moving toward the house. Give me 10 minutes. There's something else, Tom called after him. Driver said the leader recognized her name. She's Henry Turner's daughter, the railroad magnate. Could be looking for ransom. Wade paused. Or worse, the Delaneys aren't known for their patience. Inside his cabin, Wade moved with practiced efficiency. He packed provisions, ammunition, and medical supplies. His Winchester rifle came down from its pegs above the fireplace, and his Colt revolver was checked and loaded. A faded tintype on his mantel caught his eye, a young woman with a gentle smile. Hannah. Gone 7 years now, taken by the same fever that had nearly claimed him too. He pushed the memory away. There was no time for ghosts today. Outside, he saddled Midnight and secured his bedroll and supplies. Tom watched him with a knowing expression. You're going alone, aren't you? Wade nodded. Posse will make too much noise. I can move faster on my own. The girl's father is offering a substantial reward. Wade swung into the saddle. I'm not doing it for the money, Tom. I know that, the sheriff replied. Just thought you should be aware. Her father telegraphed the moment he got word. Said he's on his way from Boston, but it'll take him at least 2 weeks to get here. She doesn't have 2 weeks, Wade said grimly. Which way were they headed? Driver said they went northwest toward the high country. Wade nodded. That made sense. The Delaney gang was known to hide out in the labyrinth of canyons and caves in the foothills. I'll bring her back, Tom. The sheriff reached up to clasp his arm. I know you will. Just make sure you both come back alive. Wade touched the brim of his hat and turned Midnight toward the trail. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. If he rode hard, he could reach the site of the holdup before dark and begin tracking at first light. As he rode, his mind turned to the woman. Catherine Turner, an Easterner, no doubt soft and unprepared for the harsh realities of the frontier. He wondered what had brought her to Wyoming territory in the first place. Railroad barons' daughters typically didn't venture this far west without good reason. It didn't matter. What mattered was finding her before the Delaneys decided she was more trouble than she was worth. The stagecoach was still where it had been attacked, the driver and remaining passengers having made camp while waiting for assistance from town. Wade dismounted, studying the scene with practiced eyes. The young clerk approached him nervously. Are you with the sheriff? Wade nodded. Wade Parker, I'm going after Miss Turner. Relief washed over the clerk's face. The driver gave me this, said to give it to whoever came looking for her. He handed over a scrap of paper. Wade unfolded it to find a hastily scribbled note. Red-headed leader is Deke Delaney. 4 men total. Headed for Owl Canyon from the sound of it. Wade's jaw tightened. Owl Canyon was notorious outlaw territory, a maze of narrow passages and hidden caves. It would be a perfect place to hide a hostage. Tell me about Miss Turner, Wade said, pocketing the note. The clerk fidgeted with his hat. Lovely young lady. Refined, educated. Said she was coming west to teach school in Rock Springs. Had all her worldly possessions in her trunk. Wade glanced at the ransacked luggage strapped to the back of the coach. They leave anything of hers behind. Just some books and clothes they deemed worthless, the driver interjected, joining them. But they were mighty interested when they heard her name. That Delaney fellow's eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. How was she when they took her? Scared, but holding herself together, the driver said. Got spine, that one. Didn't scream or faint like some might. Wade nodded, committing this to memory as he surveyed the ground. Even in the fading light, he could make out the tracks leading northwest. 4 horses, one carrying double weight. I'll head out at first light, he told them. If the sheriff's posse comes by, tell them I'm on the trail. That night, as he sat beside his small campfire, Wade cleaned his weapons and prepared for what lay ahead. The Delaney gang was notorious throughout the territory, ruthless, desperate men who wouldn't hesitate to kill. Deke Delaney, their leader, was known for his quick temper and quicker trigger finger. He'd escaped justice more times than Wade could count, slipping away into the wilderness like a ghost. But Wade had spent years tracking men like Delaney. He'd hunted renegades across 4 territories. If anyone could find Catherine Turner and bring her home safely, it was him. As he stared into the flames, he wondered what she looked like, this Eastern woman who'd ventured so far from home. Was she frightened? Had they hurt her? The thought kindled something protective in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. I'm coming, he whispered to the night, a promise carried away on the wind. Catherine's wrists were raw from the rope that bound them. 2 days had passed since her abduction. 2 days of riding through increasingly rough terrain, stopping only for brief rests. They'd reached a hidden canyon late the previous day, making camp in a cave that showed signs of frequent use stored supplies, crude furniture fashioned from crates and logs. Drink. Deke Delaney thrust a canteen toward her. His face was no longer masked, revealing weathered features and cold blue eyes that missed nothing. Catherine took the canteen with bound hands and drank deeply. Despite her fear, she refused to show weakness. Her father had always praised her composure, her ability to maintain dignity in difficult situations. Never had that skill been more necessary. "Why have you brought me here?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Delaney crouched before her, studying her face. "Your daddy's got money. Lots of it, and he'll pay to get you back safe and sound." "You don't know my father," Catherine said. "He's not a man who responds well to threats." Delaney laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Oh, he'll respond to this one. We're sending our demands today. $20,000 or his precious daughter doesn't come home." Catherine's stomach twisted. It was an enormous sum, but not beyond her father's means. The question was whether he would pay it. Their relationship had been strained since she'd announced her intention to teach in Wyoming rather than marry the banker's son he'd selected for her. "And if he pays?" she asked. "How can I trust you'll let me go?" Something flickered in Delaney's eyes, uncertainty, perhaps, or a hint of conscience quickly suppressed. "I'm a lot of things, Miss Turner, but I ain't never killed a woman. You behave yourself, your daddy pays up, and you'll go free." One of the other outlaws, a weasel-faced man called Rigby, spat into the fire. "Unless that bounty hunter catches up to us first." Delaney's head snapped around. "What bounty hunter?" "Heard some talk back in town 'fore we left," Rigby said. "Wade Parker's back in these parts. Word is he's working with the marshal's office again." The change in Delaney was immediate. His face hardened, and Catherine saw a flicker of fear beneath his bravado. "Parker's got no reason to come after us." "Unless someone sent him," said another outlaw, a hulking man they called Bear. "Stagecoach driver could have recognized us." Delaney paced the small cave, his spurs jingling with each step. "Parker," he muttered. "Thought he'd hung up his guns after that business in Cheyenne." "Who is Wade Parker?" Catherine asked, the name somehow giving her a flicker of hope. Delaney glared at her. "Nobody you need to worry about, because he ain't gonna find us, and if he does." He patted his revolver meaningfully. Later, as the outlaws slept, Catherine lay awake, staring at the cave ceiling. Wade Parker. The name repeated itself in her mind, a talisman against fear. She didn't know who this man was, but the reaction his name had provoked told her enough. He was someone the Delaney gang feared. She thought of her students waiting in Rock Springs, children she'd never even met, but had committed to teach. She thought of her father, receiving news of her kidnapping. Would he come himself, or simply send money? Their last parting had been bitter, his disapproval of her choices hanging between them like a wall. Silently, Catherine made a vow. If when she survived this ordeal, she would live on her own terms. No more bending to her father's will, no more compromising her dreams to meet others' expectations. First, however, she had to stay alive. Morning came with the sound of horses approaching the cave. Catherine was jerked awake as Delaney and his men scrambled for their weapons. "It's just me, Deke," called a voice from outside. Delaney relaxed slightly, motioning for one of his men to check. A moment later, a thin man with a pockmarked face entered the cave. "Jeb," Delaney acknowledged. "You deliver the message," the newcomer nodded, dropping a saddlebag on the ground. "Left it with the telegraph operator in Miller's Crossing like you said. But I got news you ain't gonna like." "Spit it out," Delaney demanded. "Parker's on our trail. Picked it up at the Stagecoach. Word is he's riding alone," Delaney cursed. "How far behind?" "Half a day, maybe less." Man rides like the devil himself is on his heels. Catherine's heart leaped. Someone was coming for her. Someone skilled enough to track 4 men through wild country. "We need to move," Delaney decided. "Pack up. We're heading deeper into the canyon." "What about her?" Rigby jerked his thumb at Catherine. Delaney considered her for a moment. "She comes with us. She's our insurance if Parker catches up." Within the hour, they were mounted and moving, Catherine once again riding double with Delaney. As they descended deeper into the canyon, the walls rose higher around them, casting long shadows across their path. Catherine memorized every landmark, every turn in the trail. If she got a chance to escape, she would need to find her way out. "Your hunter friend is wasting his time," Delaney told her as they rode. "Even if he finds us, he's just one man. There's 5 of us now." "He must be formidable if he has you so concerned," Catherine replied, unable to resist the small defiance. Delaney's arm tightened around her waist, a warning. "Parker's got a reputation, that's all. But reputations don't stop bullets." They rode for hours, the canyon narrowing until they were traveling single file along a path barely wide enough for the horses. Finally, they emerged into a hidden valley, lush with grass and trees, a small stream cutting through its center. "We'll camp here," Delaney announced. "Jeb, you and Bear take first watch. If Parker's fool enough to follow us in here, I want to know." As the men made camp, Catherine was allowed a small measure of freedom, though Rigby watched her constantly, his hand never far from his gun. She walked to the stream, washing dust from her face and hands, the cool water a blessed relief after the long ride. "How long will you keep me?" she asked Delaney when he approached to retrieve her. "Depends on your daddy," he replied. "Telegraph operator will send his reply to Miller's Crossing. Jeb'll check for it tomorrow." "And if my father refuses to pay," Delaney's face darkened, "then we got a problem, don't we?" "But rich men don't usually let their daughters die if they can help it." Catherine thought of her father's stern face, his unyielding principles. "You don't know Henry Turner." "I know enough," Delaney said sharply. "I know he's built his fortune on the backs of working men. I know he forecloses on farms and buys land at pennies on the dollar. I know he doesn't care who he hurts as long as his pockets get fatter." The vehemence in his voice surprised her. "You speak as though this is personal." Something flashed in Delaney's eyes, pain, quickly masked. "My pa had a spread near Laramie. Good land, good water. When the railroad wanted to come through, your daddy's men made him an offer that wouldn't have bought a decent saddle. When he refused, there was an accident. Barn burned down, pa inside it." Catherine felt sick. My father wouldn't save it, Delaney cut her off. I was 16. Had to watch my ma sell the land for next to nothing to cover the debts. So yeah, Miss Turner, it's personal. Your ransom is just getting back what's owed. He stomped away, leaving Catherine stunned. Could her father truly be responsible for such things? He was ruthless in business, she knew, but murder. The possibility shook the foundations of her world. That night, bound again but given a bedroll near the fire, Catherine listened to the outlaws talking in low voices. They were nervous, constantly scanning the darkness beyond their camp. Wade Parker's name was mentioned often, always with a mixture of respect and fear. They say he tracked the Comanchero gang across 3 territories after they hit that settlement in Arizona. Bear rumbled. Brought back all 4 of them face down over their saddles. I heard he was Army before he was a lawman, Jeb added. Indian scout or some such. Man can read sign like he's reading a newspaper. He's just a man, Delaney insisted, but his hand kept straying to his gun. Catherine closed her eyes, pretending sleep while hope flickered to life within her. Wade Parker was coming, and from everything she'd heard, he was exactly the kind of man who could save her. Dawn found Wade crouched beside a small stream, studying tracks in the soft mud. The Delaney gang had passed this way the previous afternoon, 5 horses now instead of 4. They were moving faster, which meant they knew they were being pursued. Wade filled his canteen and returned to Midnight, who grazed nearby. They're running scared, he told the horse as he tightened the cinch on his saddle. That's when men make mistakes. He'd been tracking them for 3 days, closing the distance steadily. They were heading for Owl Canyon just as the driver had guessed. Wade knew the area well, had hunted a different band of outlaws there years before. The canyon was a natural fortress with only a few ways in or out, most of them treacherous. But it had one weakness, a high trail that skirted the rim, accessible only to those who knew where to find it. Wade had discovered it during that long-ago manhunt, and he doubted the Delaneys knew of its existence. He mounted and set off, pushing Midnight as hard as he dared on the rough terrain. By midday, he'd reached the entrance to the canyon where the tracks divided. 3 horses had continued into the narrow passage, while 2 had turned back. Wade considered his options. Following the larger group seemed logical, but something told him it was a diversion. He studied the tracks more carefully and noticed that one of the horses heading back carried 2 riders, one significantly lighter than the other. "There you are," he murmured, turning Midnight to follow the pair. The tracks led to a small town called Miller's Crossing. Little more than a general store, saloon, and telegraph office clustered around a dusty intersection. Wade dismounted outside the saloon, hitching Midnight to the rail. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of stale beer. A few patrons glanced up as he entered, then quickly returned to their drinks. The bartender, a balding man with enormous whiskers, eyed him warily. "Whiskey," Wade said, placing a coin on the bar. As the bartender poured, Wade surveyed the room. In the corner, a weasel-faced man sat hunched over a telegram, reading it with evident satisfaction. Beside him sat a bulkier man, his back to the wall, eyes constantly scanning the room. The bartender slid the whiskey toward Wade. "Passing through." "Looking for someone," Wade replied, just loud enough to be heard across the room. "Catherine Turner." The effect was immediate. The weasel-faced man's head snapped up and his companion's hand moved to his gun. "Don't know nobody by that name," the bartender said carefully, his eyes flicking toward the corner table. Wade sipped his whiskey, keeping his back to the bar, his reflection in the mirror allowing him to watch the 2 men. "That's strange. Heard she might be in the company of some fellows passing through. Delaney gang, I believe they're called." The saloon fell silent. The weasel-faced man folded his telegram, whispered something to his companion, and they both stood. "Mister, I don't want no trouble in my place," the bartender said quietly. "Neither do I," Wade replied, setting down his glass. "But I aim to find Miss Turner." The two men were moving toward the door now, trying to appear casual. Wade waited until they were almost there before speaking again. "Leaving so soon, gentlemen? We haven't been properly introduced." The larger man spun, drawing his gun with surprising speed. Wade was faster. His Colt cleared its holster and fired in one fluid motion. The man staggered backward, clutching his shoulder as his unfired weapon clattered to the floor. The weasel-faced man froze, his own gun halfway drawn. "Don't shoot, don't shoot. That's wise," Wade said, his voice level. "Now, why don't you tell me where Miss Turner is?" "I don't know no Miss Turner." Wade's second shot splintered the doorframe inches from the man's head. "Next one won't miss. Where is she?" "Owl Canyon," the man blurted. "Deke's got her at the Hidden Valley." "How many men with him?" "Just 3 now, Deke, Rigby, and that Indian half-breed they call Bear. I swear that's all I know." Wade nodded toward the telegram in the man's hand. "What's that?" The man swallowed hard. "Response from her pa. Says he'll pay, but he wants proof she's alive first." "Hand it over." With trembling fingers, the man complied. Wade read the telegram quickly. "Will pay ransom upon receipt of proof. My daughter live. Stop. Await further instructions. Stop. Henry Turner." "What were you planning to do with this information?" Wade asked. "Take it back to Deke." "We was supposed to meet him tomorrow at the South Ridge." Wade pocketed the telegram. "Change of plans. You're taking me there now. Deke'll kill me." "I'll kill you if you don't," Wade said simply. "Your choice." 10 minutes later, they were riding out of Miller's Crossing. The weasel-faced man, who identified himself as Jeb, leading the way with his hands tied to his saddle horn. His wounded companion had been left in the custody of the local doctor, who had promised to notify the sheriff. "You're Wade Parker," Jeb said as they rode. "Heard about you. They say you never give up once you're on a trail." "They say right," Wade replied. "How's the girl?" Jeb shrugged. "Fine. Last I saw, Deke ain't hurt her. Says he won't if her pa pays up." "And if he doesn't?" Jeb was silent for a long moment. "Deke's got a personal grudge against Turner. Says the man ruined his family." Wade processed this information. "That complicates things." "Deke ain't a killer by nature," Jeb said quickly. "Least not of women. But he's desperate, and Bear's got a mean streak a mile wide." "Then we'd better get there before desperation wins out," Wade said grimly, urging midnight to a faster pace. They rode hard through the afternoon and into the evening, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. As night fell, they made a cold camp in a sheltered ravine, Wade keeping a careful watch on his prisoner. "Why you doing this?" Jeb asked as they chewed on jerky and hardtack. "Ain't like she's anything to you. Is it the reward?" Wade took his time answering. "I've been a lawman most of my life. Sworn to protect people. You ain't wearing a badge now." "Some oaths don't need a badge." Jeb studied him in the moonlight. "Heard you quit after your wife died. That true?" Wade's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern. Just trying to figure you out, Parker. Man like you could be living comfortable, maybe working as a town marshal somewhere. Instead you're out here, risking your neck for some Eastern lady you never met." "Get some sleep," Wade said, ending the conversation. "We ride at first light." As Jeb settled down, Wade sat with his back against a boulder, rifle across his lap, watching the stars wheel overhead. The Outlaws' questions had stirred memories he usually kept buried. Hannah's face rose in his mind, her smile, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. 7 years gone, yet sometimes the loss felt as fresh as yesterday. After her death, he drifted for a time, taking increasingly dangerous assignments, not particularly caring if he lived or died. It was Tom Doyle who'd pulled him back from that edge, offering him work as a deputy in Rock Springs. He'd been there almost a year now, rebuilding something resembling a life, and now a kidnapped woman, an outlaw gang, a desperate chase across wild country. Why had he volunteered? The reward money was substantial, but he'd never been motivated by gold. Was it simply duty, as he'd told Jeb? Or was there something else, a need to save someone when he couldn't save Hannah? Wade pushed the thoughts away. It didn't matter why he was doing this. What mattered was bringing Catherine Turner home safely. Everything else was just noise. Morning came cold and clear. They were on the trail again before the sun had fully cleared the horizon, Jeb leading the way toward the hidden valley where Delaney was holding Catherine. As they approached Owl Canyon, Wade grew increasingly alert, watching for signs of sentries or traps. How much further? He asked as they navigated a particularly narrow section of trail. "Couple hours," Jeb replied. "There's a hidden passage up ahead that leads to the valley. Deke found it years ago. Makes a good hideout cause most folks don't even know it exists." Wade nodded, memorizing landmarks as they rode. If things went badly, he might need to find his way out in a hurry. They had just rounded a bend when Jeb suddenly reined in his horse. "Wait," he hissed. "Something ain't right." Wade scanned the trail ahead but saw nothing unusual. "What is it?" "Deke always posts a lookout at that big boulder," Jeb said, pointing to a massive rock formation overlooking the trail. "I don't see nobody." Wade's instincts, honed by years of tracking dangerous men, told him something was indeed wrong. Could they have moved on? "Not without me and Bear," Jeb insisted. "We was supposed to bring back word about the ransom." Wade considered their options. Continuing along the trail might lead them into an ambush, but turning back meant losing precious time. "Is there another way into the valley?" he asked. Jeb hesitated. "Well, there's an old game trail that comes in from the north side. Real steep, though. Hardly nobody uses it." "Show me." They backtracked and began a grueling climb up a nearly invisible path that snaked along the canyon wall. Several times, loose rocks gave way beneath their horses' hooves, sending cascades of debris down the slope. Wade's muscles tensed with each noise, waiting for the shot that would announce they'd been discovered. It never came. After an hour of careful climbing, they crested a ridge and looked down into a small valley nestled between towering cliffs. A stream ran through its center, and several horses grazed near a stand of cottonwoods. Wade could make out the remains of a campfire and what appeared to be a crude shelter built against the cliff face, but no people were visible. "Where are they?" Wade murmured, studying the scene through his field glasses. "Don't know," Jeb replied, genuine confusion in his voice. "They should be here." Wade's gaze swept the valley methodically, looking for any sign of movement or habitation. Finally, he spotted a darker shadow against the cliff face, possibly the entrance to a cave. "There," he said, pointing. "Is that a cave?" Jeb squinted. "Yeah, Deke mentioned it. Said it goes way back into the mountain. Good place to hide if someone comes looking. Or to keep a prisoner," Wade added grimly. "We're going down there, and Jeb, if this is a trap, you'll be the first one to die." The outlaw swallowed hard. "It ain't no trap, Parker, I swear." They descended carefully, using the trees and rocks for cover. Wade kept his rifle ready, watching for any sign of movement. When they reached the valley floor, he secured both horses in a thicket and motioned for Jeb to lead the way toward the cave. As they approached, Wade noted fresh footprints in the soft earth, at least 3 different sets, one notably smaller than the others. A woman's prints. His pulse quickened. They were in the right place. The cave entrance was partially hidden by brush, but once past it, opened into a sizable chamber. A cold campfire sat in the center, surrounded by bedrolls and supplies. Deeper shadows suggested the cave continued further back. "Hello," Jeb called out hesitantly. "Deke, it's me, Jeb." Silence answered him. Wade moved forward cautiously, checking each bedroll. All were empty. A woman's shawl lay discarded near one of them, along with a hairbrush containing a few strands of auburn hair. Catherine Turner had definitely been here. "They've moved deeper into the cave," Wade concluded, drawing his revolver. "Probably heard us coming." Jeb shook his head. "I don't like this, Parker. Something's wrong." Wade was inclined to agree, but they'd come too far to turn back now. "Stay behind me," he ordered, moving toward the dark passage at the back of the chamber. The tunnel narrowed as they proceeded, forcing them to walk single file. Wade kept one hand on the rough wall for guidance as the light from the entrance faded. The air grew cooler, with a damp, mineral smell. They had gone perhaps 50 yards when Wade heard a faint sound ahead, like someone moving. He froze, raising his hand to halt Jeb. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice echoing eerily. "Help!" The response was immediate, a woman's voice, strained but clear. "Please help me." Wade's heart leaped. "Miss Turner?" "Yes. Oh, thank God. They left me here. Please hurry." Wade moved forward more quickly now, rounding a bend in the tunnel to find the passage opening into another chamber. A lantern burned low on a rock shelf, illuminating a slender figure huddled against the far wall. Catherine Turner looked up as Wade entered, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her wrists bound before her. Her auburn hair had come loose from its pins, falling in tangled waves around a face that, despite its current state, showed unmistakable beauty and strength. "Are you Wade Parker?" she asked, her voice steadier than he would have expected. "I am," he confirmed, holstering his gun and moving toward her. "Are you hurt, Miss Turner?" "No, just frightened and angry." Her gaze moved past him to Jeb, who hung back nervously. "You brought one of them with you. He's helping me. For now." Wade knelt beside her, drawing his knife to cut her bonds. "Where are the others?" "Gone," she said, wincing as the rope fell away from her raw wrists. "There was some kind of argument. Delaney wanted to wait for the ransom, but the one they call Bear thought you were getting too close. They fought. I couldn't see what happened, but there was a gunshot. After that, Delaney told me to stay quiet, that he'd be back. They all left about 2 hours ago." Wade helped her to her feet. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "We need to get out of here. Can you walk?" She nodded, straightening her shoulders with visible determination. "I can do whatever is necessary to leave this place, Mr. Parker." Despite everything, Wade found himself admiring her spirit. Eastern lady or not, Catherine Turner had grit. "Parker," Jeb interrupted urgently. "If Deke and the others are still around, we're sitting ducks in here." "He's right," Wade agreed. "We'll head back to the horses and make for Rock Springs immediately." "My belongings," Catherine began. "We'll send someone back for them if possible," Wade promised. "Right now, your safety is what matters." They moved back through the tunnel, Wade leading the way with Catherine behind him and Jeb bringing up the rear. As they neared the main chamber, Wade's instincts screamed a warning. He held up his hand, halting their progress. "What is it?" Catherine whispered. "Not sure," he murmured. "Stay here." He crept forward alone, peering cautiously into the chamber. At first, everything appeared as they had left it. Then he spotted the disturbance. One of the bedrolls had been moved, and fresh boot prints marked the dusty floor. Someone had entered the cave while they were rescuing Catherine. Wade drew his revolver, scanning the chamber carefully. The entrance remained clear, sunlight spilling through it unobstructed. But the new tracks led toward a shadowy alcove on the far side, partially hidden by a jutting rock. He was about to advance when a voice called out from the alcove. "That's far enough, Parker." Deke Delaney stepped into view, his revolver aimed squarely at Wade's chest. Blood stained one side of his shirt, and his face was pale beneath its weathering. "Delaney," Wade acknowledged, his own gun steady. "Looks like you've had some trouble." "Bear decided he wanted a bigger cut," Delaney said grimly. "Made the mistake of trying to take it. Where's the girl?" "Safe," Wade replied, "and staying that way." Delaney's gaze flickered past Wade to the tunnel entrance where Catherine now stood, Jeb beside her. "Jeb, you yellow-bellied traitor. Should have known you'd turn coat to save your own skin." "Don't blame him," Wade said. "He didn't have much choice. Put down the gun, Delaney. It's over." For a moment it seemed Delaney might comply. His wounded arm trembled with the effort of holding his weapon, then his face hardened. "Can't do that, Parker. That girl's my ticket. Her daddy owes me." "Whatever Henry Turner did to your family, she's not responsible," Wade said, keeping his voice level. "She's just a school teacher trying to make her way in the world." Surprise flashed across Delaney's face. "She told you about that. Enough to know this is personal for you. But kidnapping an innocent woman won't bring your father back or right any wrongs." Delaney's gun wavered slightly. "You don't understand. That man destroyed my family, took everything from us. Someone has to pay." "And someone will," Wade promised. "But not like this. Not through more bloodshed." Catherine stepped forward, ignoring Wade's warning glance. "Mr. Delaney, if what you say about my father is true, I am truly sorry. But I am not my father. I came west to escape his control, to build my own life away from his influence." Delaney stared at her, conflict evident in his face. For a long moment, the cave was silent except for the distant drip of water and their collective breathing. Finally, Delaney lowered his gun. "Go," he said tiredly. "Get out of here before I change my mind." Wade kept his weapon trained on the outlaw. "You're coming with us." "No," Delaney shook his head. "I reckon I've done enough damage. I'll give myself up, but not today. I've got some thinking to do first." Wade hesitated, torn between his duty to apprehend the outlaw and his primary mission to get Catherine to safety. Before he could decide, Delaney made the choice for him. "I won't follow you," the outlaw promised. "You have my word on that. Just go, take her home." Catherine touched Wade's arm lightly. "Please, Mr. Parker, let's leave. I've had quite enough of this place." After a long moment, Wade nodded. "If I see you again, Delaney, it'll be with a warrant in my hand." "Fair enough," the outlaw agreed. Wade backed toward the entrance, keeping Catherine behind him and his gun on Delaney. Jeb had already disappeared, presumably fleeing while attention was focused elsewhere. Outside, the bright Wyoming sun was almost blinding after the cave's darkness. Wade guided Catherine quickly to where the horses were hidden, constantly watching for signs of the other outlaws. "Can you ride?" he asked as he untied Midnight. "Yes," Catherine assured him. "My father insisted I learn proper riding, not just side saddle." Wade helped her mount Jeb's abandoned horse, then swung onto Midnight. "We'll ride hard until nightfall. I want as much distance between us and this place as possible." Catherine nodded, gathering the reins with confident hands. "I'm ready, Mr. Parker. Lead the way." As they rode from the valley, Wade couldn't help but glance back at the cave entrance. Delaney stood there, a solitary figure silhouetted against the darkness, watching them go. They made good time, traveling parallel to the main trail but keeping to higher ground where they could spot anyone following. Catherine rode well, making no complaints despite what must have been considerable discomfort after days of captivity. Occasionally, Wade caught her studying him with curious eyes, but she asked no questions, focusing instead on the journey. By late afternoon, they had put considerable distance between themselves and Owl Canyon. Wade finally called a halt beside a small stream where the horses could drink, and they could rest briefly. Catherine dismounted with a barely suppressed groan, her legs clearly stiff from the long ride. When Wade offered his canteen, she accepted it gratefully, drinking deeply before handing it back. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "Not just for the water, for coming after me when you didn't have to." "I did have to," Wade replied simply. A small smile touched her lips. "Because you're a lawman, or a bounty hunter, former deputy marshal," he clarified, "currently just a rancher with some tracking skills." "The outlaws seemed terrified of you," Catherine observed. "They spoke of you as if you were some kind of legend." Wade shrugged uncomfortably. "Men like that build up stories to explain their failures. Makes it easier to accept being caught." Catherine studied him thoughtfully. "I don't think it was just stories, Mr. Parker. You tracked them across difficult terrain and faced down armed men without hesitation. That suggests the reputation is well earned." Wade busied himself checking Midnight's saddle to avoid her perceptive gaze. There was something about Catherine Turner that made him acutely aware of himself in a way he hadn't been in years. Perhaps it was the contrast between her refined Eastern manners and the rough frontier world, or maybe it was simply the quiet strength he sensed beneath her proper exterior. "We should keep moving," he said finally. "There's a line shack about 2 hours from here where we can spend the night." "Tomorrow we'll reach Rock Springs." Catherine nodded, moving to remount her horse. Wade noticed her wince as she raised her arms to the saddle horn. "You're hurt," he said, stepping closer. "It's nothing," she insisted, "just sore from being bound." Wade gently took her wrists, turning them to examine the raw, chafed skin where the ropes had cut into her. "I have some salve that will help. We'll tend to these when we stop for the night." Their eyes met, and for a moment neither moved. Wade was suddenly very aware of how close they were standing, of the delicate bones of her wrists beneath his fingers, of the faint scent of lavender that somehow persisted despite her ordeal. Catherine broke the spell, withdrawing her hands and turning back to her horse. "Thank you," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "That would be most appreciated." They rode in companionable silence as the afternoon waned into evening. The line shack appeared just as dusk was settling, a simple one-room structure built to shelter cowboys working the range in bad weather. It was basic but sound, with a small stove, a rough table and chairs, and a narrow bunk built into one wall. "It's not much," Wade said apologetically as he lit the lamp hanging from a ceiling beam. Catherine looked around with obvious relief. "After sleeping on cave floors, Mr. Parker, it seems positively luxurious." Wade busied himself with the horses while Catherine explored the shack. When he returned with their saddlebags, she had already found the woodpile and was attempting to light the stove. "Allow me," he said, taking the matches from her. "This old stove has a trick to it." Soon a fire was crackling in the iron belly of the stove, warming the small space. Wade rummaged in his saddlebag and produced a tin of salve and some clean bandages. "Sit," he instructed, gesturing to one of the chairs. "Let me see to those wrists." Catherine obeyed, extending her arms across the rough table. The lamp cast a warm glow over her features as Wade gently applied the salve to her injured skin. He worked carefully, conscious of causing her any additional pain. "You have a healer's touch, Mr. Parker," she commented. "Surprisingly gentle for a man of your profession." "Had plenty of practice patching myself up over the years," he replied, concentrating on wrapping the bandages. "And please call me Wade. Mr. Parker makes me feel like I should be wearing a suit and sitting behind a desk." That earned him a small laugh, a musical sound that lightened the air between them. "Very well, Wade, and you must call me Catherine. After all, you've rescued me from outlaws. I think we can dispense with formalities." Wade finished with her wrists and stood to prepare a simple meal from his provisions: jerky, hardtack, and coffee. It wasn't much, but Catherine ate with apparent appreciation. "Tell me about Rock Springs," she said as they ate. "What sort of place is it?" "Growing fast," Wade replied. "The railroad and the coal mines bring new people every day. Rough in parts, but decent folks too. They've been wanting a proper school for some time." "And that's where I come in," Catherine said with a small smile. "Though I'm beginning to wonder if my father was right about the West being too dangerous for me. One encounter with outlaws doesn't define the territory," Wade assured her. "Most days are peaceful enough. What about you?" she asked. "Have you been in Wyoming territory long?" Wade nodded. "Most of my life. Served with the cavalry for a spell, then as a deputy marshal. Now I've got a small ranch outside Rock Springs." "The outlaws mentioned." Catherine hesitated. "They said you lost your wife." Wade's hand stilled on his coffee cup. 7 years ago. Fever took her." "I'm so sorry," Catherine said softly. "It was a hard time," Wade acknowledged. He rarely spoke of Hannah, but something about Catherine's gentle inquiry made it easier. "Afterward, I threw myself into the most dangerous assignments I could find. Didn't much care if I lived or died." "What changed?" Wade considered the question. "Time, I suppose, and good friends who wouldn't let me destroy myself. Eventually, I realized Hannah wouldn't have wanted me to waste the life she didn't get to have." Catherine nodded, understanding in her eyes. "My mother died 2 years ago, consumption. I still find myself turning to tell her something, only to remember she's gone." "It gets easier," Wade said. "Not better exactly, but easier to carry." They fell silent, the crackling of the stove and the occasional stamp of the horses outside the only sounds. It was a companionable silence, comfortable in a way Wade hadn't experienced in a long time. "You should take the bunk," he said finally. "I'll make do on the floor." Catherine looked about to protest, then seemed to reconsider. "Thank you. I admit I'm longing for a proper rest." Wade spread his bedroll near the stove and extinguished the lamp. In the darkness, he could hear Catherine settling onto the bunk, the rustle of blankets as she made herself comfortable. "Wade," her voice came soft through the darkness. "Yes. I've been thinking about what Delaney said regarding my father. Do you think it could be true?" Wade chose his words carefully. "Railroad men have been known to use harsh tactics to get what they want. I can't speak to your father's specific actions." "I've always known he was ruthless in business," Catherine said, her voice troubled. "But to be responsible for a man's death, I can't reconcile that with the father I know." "People are complicated," Wade replied. "Good men sometimes do terrible things, especially when money and power are involved. But that doesn't mean Delaney's version is the whole truth." "No," she agreed. "Still, I can't help but wonder what other consequences my father's business practices have had. How many lives affected that I never knew about." "That's not your burden to bear, Catherine." "Isn't it, though?" she questioned. "I've lived a privileged life because of his wealth." "If that wealth came at others' expense?" Wade had no easy answer for her. "All you can do is live your own life according to your own principles. That's why you came west, isn't it? To build something that's yours alone." "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, it was." They fell silent again, and soon Wade heard Catherine's breathing deepen into sleep. He lay awake longer, watching the dying embers in the stove and listening to the night sounds outside the shack. His thoughts kept returning to the woman sleeping a few feet away, her courage, her thoughtfulness, the way she had faced her ordeal with dignity. He'd known her less than a day, yet he felt a connection he couldn't explain. Perhaps it was simply the intense circumstances of their meeting, or the intimate conversations shared in the quiet darkness. Whatever it was, Wade knew with certainty that Catherine Turner was unlike any woman he'd met since Hannah. The thought both attracted and unsettled him. Morning came with the chirping of birds and sunlight streaming through the shack's single window. Wade had risen early, rekindled the fire, and was brewing coffee when Catherine awoke. She sat up, hair tousled from sleep, and for a moment looked disoriented. "Good morning," Wade said, pouring a cup of coffee and offering it to her. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in days," she replied, accepting the cup gratefully, "though I'm afraid I must look a fright." Wade thought she looked lovely, with her auburn hair falling loose around her shoulders and her cheeks flushed from sleep, but he kept that observation to himself. "We'll reach Rock Springs by midday if we start soon." Catherine nodded, running fingers through her tangled hair in a futile attempt to tidy it. "I wish I had a hairbrush, or at least a comb." Wade rummaged in his saddlebag and produced a small wooden comb. "It's not fancy, but it might help." She accepted it with a smile. "Thank you." "Would you mind terribly? Could I have a few minutes of privacy?" "Of course," Wade said, feeling suddenly foolish for not considering her need for privacy earlier. "I'll see to the horses." Outside, the morning was crisp and clear, promising another beautiful spring day. Wade checked both horses, ensuring they were fit for the final leg of the journey. As he worked, he found himself wondering what would happen once they reached Rock Springs. Catherine would begin her teaching position, and he would return to his ranch. Their paths would likely cross occasionally in the small town, but the intense connection of the past day would fade as normal life resumed. The thought left him with an unexpected sense of loss. When he returned to the shack, Catherine had transformed herself as best she could. Her hair was neatly braided, her dress smoothed, and her face washed clean in water from the small basin. She couldn't hide the fatigue in her eyes or the bandages on her wrists, but she had reclaimed some of the dignity the Outlaws had tried to strip from her. "Ready?" Wade asked, admiring her resilience. She nodded, gathering the few belongings she had. "I can't thank you enough for coming after me, Wade. Not everyone would have risked themselves for a stranger." "You're not a stranger anymore," he replied simply. They rode at a steady pace through the morning, the terrain gradually changing from rugged wilderness to more settled country as they approached Rock Springs. Occasionally, they passed other travelers or distant homesteads, signs of civilization returning after the isolation of the past days. Catherine grew more animated as they rode, pointing out wildflowers or asking questions about landmarks they passed. Wade found himself telling her stories about the territory, historical events, local legends, personal experiences from his years as a lawman. She was an attentive listener, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a sharp intelligence behind her refined manners. "There it is," Wade said finally, as they crested a rise to see Rock Springs spread before them. The town sat in a valley, with the railroad tracks cutting through its center like a steel spine. Smoke rose from the coal mines to the north, and buildings clustered around the depot and Main Street. "It's larger than I expected," Catherine commented, studying her new home. "And growing every day," Wade replied. "The school's on the east side near the church. I'll take you there first, then to the boarding house where you'll be staying." As they rode into town, people stopped to stare. Word of the Stagecoach robbery had spread quickly, and Wade had no doubt that rumors of his pursuit of the Delaney gang had followed. He noticed Catherine straightening in her saddle, chin lifting as if preparing to face scrutiny. They had just reached the main street when a shout went up. "Parker's back, and he's got the lady teacher with him." Within moments, they were surrounded by townspeople, all talking at once, asking questions, offering welcomes. Sheriff Doyle pushed through the crowd, his weathered face breaking into a grin when he saw them. Wade, Miss Turner. Thank God you're both safe. Wade dismounted and helped Catherine down from her horse. Sheriff Doyle, this is Miss Catherine Turner. As you can see, she's safe and sound, if a bit worse for wear. Miss Turner, Doyle tipped his hat. The whole town's been worried sick about you. We're mighty glad to see you made it here safely. Catherine smiled, though Wade could see she was overwhelmed by the attention. Thank you, Sheriff. I'm very grateful to be here, thanks entirely to Mr. Parker's bravery. A matronly woman pushed forward through the crowd. Miss Turner, I'm Martha Wilson, head of the school board. We've been beside ourselves with worry. Come along with me now, dear. You need rest and a hot bath and proper food. We can discuss the school when you're recovered. Catherine glanced at Wade, a flicker of reluctance in her eyes. I should see to my belongings first, and properly thank Mr. Parker. Nonsense, Mrs. Wilson interrupted. Your trunks arrived yesterday safe and sound. They're already at the boarding house. As for thanking Mr. Parker, there'll be plenty of time for that later. Wade nodded encouragement. Go on, you need rest. I'll check on you tomorrow. Catherine hesitated, then stepped closer to him, speaking quietly beneath the hubbub of voices. Thank you again, Wade, for everything. Before he could respond, Mrs. Wilson had taken Catherine's arm and was guiding her through the crowd toward the boarding house, already explaining about the school and the students eager to meet their new teacher. Wade watched them go, feeling a curious emptiness despite the celebratory atmosphere around him. Sheriff Doyle clapped him on the shoulder. You did good, Wade. Real good. Come on over to the office and tell me what happened. The telegraph's been buzzing with messages from Turner Sr., man's frantic about his daughter. Wade followed Doyle to the sheriff's office, where he gave a detailed account of tracking the Delaney gang and rescuing Catherine. He omitted some details, the more personal conversations, the fact that he'd let Delaney go, focusing instead on the essential facts. So Delaney's still out there, Doyle mused when Wade finished, along with this Bear fellow. Delaney's wounded, and I don't think he'll be causing more trouble, Wade said. But Bear's a different story. Might be worth sending word to other jurisdictions to watch for him. Doyle nodded. Already done, and speaking of sending word. He pushed a telegram across the desk. This came for you yesterday, from Henry Turner himself. Wade read the brief message. Understand you are searching for my daughter. Stop reward of $5,000 for her safe return. Stop wire confirmation of her safety immediately upon rescue. Stop Henry Turner. $5,000, Doyle whistled. That's a mighty generous reward. Wade folded the telegram and put it in his pocket. I'll wire him that she's safe. And about the reward, Wade shrugged. Wasn't doing it for money. Doyle studied him with knowing eyes. No, I don't suppose you were. Still, a man would be a fool to turn down that kind of money. Never claimed to be the wisest man, Wade replied with a half-smile. Now, if there's nothing else, I'd like to get home. Been a long few days. Doyle walked him to the door. Get some rest, but Wade, don't be a stranger. The marshal's office has been asking if you'd consider taking up the badge again. Territory needs good men. Wade nodded noncommittally and headed for his horse. Right now, all he wanted was his own bed and time to sort through the tumult of emotions the past days had stirred up. The next morning, Wade stood outside the boarding house, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. He'd bathed, shaved, and put on his best shirt, behaviors that had drawn a knowing look from his nearest neighbor when he'd stopped by to check on his livestock. Before he could knock, the door opened to reveal Mrs. Wilson. Mr. Parker, she said with a smile. I had a feeling you'd be by this morning. Come in, come in. Miss Turner is in the parlor. The boarding house was a well-maintained two-story structure that housed several of the town's unmarried professionals. The parlor was a formal room with horsehair furniture and antimacassars on every chair back. Catherine sat near the window, reading a book. She looked up as Wade entered, her face brightening. She had transformed since he'd last seen her. Gone were the dirt and dishevelment of the trail. Her auburn hair was neatly arranged, and she wore a simple blue dress that complemented her fair complexion. Only the bandages still visible at her wrists hinted at her recent ordeal. "Wade," she said, rising to greet him. "How wonderful to see you." Mrs. Wilson cleared her throat meaningfully. "I'll leave you two to chat, but please remember this is a respectable establishment. I'll return with tea in a few minutes." Once the older woman had left, Catherine's formal demeanor relaxed into a genuine smile. "I'm so glad you came. I was afraid yesterday's chaos might have driven you back to your ranch without a proper goodbye. I wanted to make sure you were settling in all right," Wade said, remaining standing until she resumed her seat. He took the chair opposite her, setting his hat on his knee. "How are you feeling?" "Much improved after a bath and a night in a real bed," she replied. "Though I admit I'm still a bit overwhelmed by all the attention. The entire school board visited yesterday, along with the minister, the mayor, and what felt like half the town's ladies." "Your big news in Rock Springs," Wade said with a smile. "Not every day a new schoolteacher arrives via outlaw kidnapping and dramatic rescue," Catherine laughed. "I suppose not, though I'd have preferred a less eventful journey." She sobered, studying him. "Have you heard any more about Delaney or the others?" Wade shook his head. "Nothing yet." "But they won't trouble you again." "I've been thinking about what he said regarding my father," Catherine admitted. "I sent a telegram yesterday asking some pointed questions. And no response yet, but I'm determined to know the truth." Wade admired her directness. "Whatever you discover, remember that you're not responsible for your father's actions." "I know," she said softly, "but I need to understand the man whose name I bear." She changed the subject. "Mrs. Wilson tells me the school term begins next Monday. Apparently, the children are quite excited to meet their new teacher from the East." "They'll be lucky to have you," Wade said sincerely. Catherine tilted her head, studying him with those perceptive eyes. "Will I see you again, Wade?" "Once the excitement dies down and I become just another resident of Rock Springs," the question caught him off guard. "If you'd like to," he replied carefully. "I would," she said simply. "Very much." Before Wade could respond, Mrs. Wilson returned with the tea tray, effectively ending their private conversation. The next half hour passed in polite small talk about the town, the school, and the coming summer. Throughout, Wade was acutely aware of Catherine's presence, the graceful movement of her hands as she poured tea, the curve of her smile, the intelligence in her eyes as she discussed her plans for the school. When it came time for him to leave, Mrs. Wilson tactfully withdrew to give them a moment alone. Catherine walked him to the door. "Thank you for coming to see me," she said. "It means a great deal." Wade hesitated, then said what had been on his mind since the previous day. "Catherine, I received a telegram from your father. He's offering a substantial reward for your safe return." She stiffened slightly. "I see, and will you claim it?" "No," Wade said firmly. "That's not why I came after you." Relief softened her features. "I didn't think it was, but I'm glad to hear you say it." She touched his arm lightly. "Why did you come after me, Wade?" The question hung between them, laden with possibilities. Wade found himself unable to give a simple answer. It had begun as duty, certainly a lawman's instinct to protect. But somewhere along the trail, it had become something more personal. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted finally, "but I'm glad I did." Catherine smiled, her eyes warming. "So am I." She hesitated, then added, "The school board is hosting a small supper on Friday evening to welcome me to the community. Would you consider attending as my guest? I'd be honored, Wade replied, surprised by how much the invitation pleased him. Until Friday, then, Catherine said. As Wade walked back to his horse, he felt lighter than he had in years. The future, which had for so long seemed a monotonous extension of the present, suddenly held possibilities he hadn't dared consider. The days that followed took on a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. Wade returned to his ranch duties, mending fences and tending livestock. But his thoughts frequently strayed to Catherine. Twice he rode into town on the pretext of supplies, finding excuses to pass by the schoolhouse where she was preparing for the coming term. Each time, they exchanged brief conversations that left him wanting more. Friday evening found him dressed in his best clothes, not quite Eastern formal wear, but respectable by frontier standards, knocking on the boarding house door. Catherine answered herself, looking radiant in a forest green dress that brought out the auburn highlights in her hair. "You look beautiful," Wade said simply. A blush touched her cheeks. "Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself." The school board supper was held in the church meeting hall, a modest affair by Eastern standards but lavish for Rock Springs. The town's leading citizens were in attendance, all eager to meet their new teacher and hear firsthand the story of her kidnapping and rescue. Throughout the evening, Wade watched Catherine navigate the social waters with grace and charm. She spoke intelligently about her educational philosophy, listened attentively to local concerns, and deflected more personal questions with gentle humor. When asked about her ordeal, she focused on Wade's bravery rather than her own fear, causing him to become the center of attention, much to his discomfort. "You've made quite an impression," Wade commented as they stepped outside for a breath of air midway through the evening. "So have you," Catherine replied. "Half the matrons in there are already planning how to match you with eligible daughters," Wade grimaced. "Been fending that off for years." "And successfully, it seems," Catherine observed. "Why is that, I wonder?" A respected former lawman with his own ranch should be quite a catch in these parts. Wade leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the night sky. "After Hannah died, I couldn't imagine being with anyone else. The thought of it felt disloyal somehow." "And now?" Catherine asked quietly. Wade turned to look at her, illuminated in the soft light spilling from the hall's windows. "Now I'm beginning to think it might be possible to honor the past while still embracing a future." Catherine's eyes held his, a world of understanding in their depths. "I think that's very wise." The moment was interrupted by Mrs. Wilson calling them back inside for dessert. As they returned to the hall, Wade offered Catherine his arm, and the warm pressure of her hand filled him with a contentment he had long forgotten. The weekend passed, and Monday brought the start of the school term. Wade found himself riding into town in the afternoon, timing his arrival to coincide with the end of the school day. He waited at a distance, watching as children spilled from the small schoolhouse, followed eventually by Catherine. She spotted him and walked over, her face alight with enthusiasm despite evident fatigue. "Wade, what brings you to town? Thought you might like to hear that the sheriff received word this morning." Deke Delaney turned himself over in Cheyenne. Catherine's eyes widened. "Voluntarily?" Wade nodded. "Said he was tired of running. Asked specifically that the Rock Springs sheriff be notified that Miss Turner needn't fear any further trouble from him." "That's surprising," Catherine said thoughtfully. "What will happen to him?" "He'll stand trial. But given that he surrendered and you're unharmed, he might avoid the harshest sentence." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad. Not that he avoids justice, but that he chose to face it. There was something in him beneath the anger and bitterness, something that wasn't entirely lost." Wade studied her with admiration. Many women would want maximum punishment for their abductor, but Catherine's compassion extended even to the man who had caused her such fear and distress. "Would you care to join me for supper?" he asked impulsively. "The hotel dining room serves a decent meal." Catherine smiled. "I'd like that very much." Over the weeks that followed, Wade and Catherine fell into a pattern. He would ride into town 2 or 3 times a week, often meeting her after school. They would walk together, sometimes taking supper at the hotel, other times simply enjoying each other's company as Catherine shared stories of her students and Wade told tales of his days as a lawman. The town watched their courtship with approval and no small amount of satisfaction. Wade Parker had been alone too long, according to local wisdom, and the new schoolteacher was just what he needed, cultured enough to refine his rough edges, but practical enough to understand frontier life. For Wade, each day brought a deepening of his feelings for Catherine. Her intelligence, her compassion, her quiet strength all reminded him of what he had loved in Hannah while being uniquely her own. He found himself looking forward to their meetings with an eagerness that would have embarrassed his younger self. Catherine, too, seemed to bloom in his company. The proper Eastern lady gradually gave way to a woman more comfortable in her own skin, more willing to speak her mind and pursue her own path. One evening in late June, they rode together to Wade's ranch. He had invited her for supper, wanting her to see the place that meant so much to him. The small cabin was neat but sparse, a bachelor's dwelling with little ornamentation. Still, the land around it was beautiful rolling hills, a clear stream, cottonwoods providing shade near the house. "It's lovely, Wade," Catherine said as he showed her around the property. "I can see why you love it here." "It's not much compared to what you're used to," he replied, suddenly conscious of the cabin's limitations. Catherine turned to face him, her expression earnest. "What I was used to was a gilded cage. This," she gestured to the open land around them. "This is freedom. This is real." Her words warmed him. They returned to the cabin where Wade had prepared a simple meal. As they ate, Catherine shared news from her latest letter from Boston. "My father is coming," she said, setting down her fork. "He arrives next week on the eastbound train." Wade felt a flicker of concern. "Is that good news?" "I'm not certain," she admitted. "Our correspondence has been strained since I questioned him about Delaney's accusations. He denied any wrongdoing, of course, but avoided addressing the specific incident. Will you confront him in person?" Catherine sighed. "I must. Not out of anger or accusation, but because I need to understand the man he truly is, not just the father I've always seen." Wade reached across the table to take her hand. "Whatever happens, you don't have to face him alone." Catherine's fingers tightened around his. "That means more than I can say." As dusk fell, they sat together on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. Wade found himself thinking of the future not in the abstract way he had for years, but in concrete terms. A future with Catherine in it. A future where this cabin became a home for two, perhaps someday for a family. The thought should have frightened him. Instead, it felt right, as if pieces long scattered were finally finding their proper places. "Penny for your thoughts," Catherine said, breaking the comfortable silence. Wade turned to her, decision crystallizing within him. "I was thinking that I'd like you to come here again. Often. That I'd like to build a proper house someday, with a room for books and maybe a piano if you'd want one. That I'd like to wake up every morning and know you're beside me." Catherine's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. "Wade, are you?" "I'm not saying it well," he admitted. "I'm not a man of fancy words. But I love you, Catherine. I think I started falling the moment I found you in that cave, so brave despite everything you'd endured." Tears gathered in Catherine's eyes. "I love you too. I think I've known it since our first night in the line shack when you told me about Hannah and I saw the depth of your heart. Wade took both her hands in his. I'm not asking formally, yet I want to do this right. Speak to your father when he arrives, have a proper ring. But I needed you to know my intentions. I want to marry you, Catherine Turner. Catherine's smile was luminous in the fading light. And I want to marry you, Wade Parker. Whenever and however you ask. He gathered her into his arms then, his lips finding hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future. As darkness fell around them, Wade felt a sense of coming home that had nothing to do with the cabin behind them, and everything to do with the woman in his arms. Henry Turner arrived on the Wednesday train, a distinguished figure in an expensive suit that immediately marked him as an outsider in Rock Springs. Catherine met him at the station, Wade standing supportively at her side. The reunion was stiff, formal handshakes and polite inquiries about the journey replacing the emotional embrace one might have expected after Catherine's ordeal. "Father, this is Wade Parker," Catherine said, a slight tremor in her voice betraying her nervousness. "The man who rescued me from the Outlaws." Turner extended a hand. "Mr. Parker, I understand I owe you a debt of gratitude and a substantial reward." Wade shook the offered hand firmly. "Your daughter's safe return is reward enough, sir." Turner's eyebrows rose slightly, but he made no further comment on the matter. "I've taken a suite at the hotel. Perhaps we could continue our conversation there, away from the dust and noise." The hotel's finest suite was modest by Eastern standards, but it offered privacy for the discussion that followed. Wade sat quietly as Catherine recounted her kidnapping and rescue, adding details only when directly asked. Throughout, Turner listened with an expressionless face, though his knuckles whitened around his walking stick when she described her captivity. "And this outlaw, Delaney," Turner said when she finished. "He made certain allegations regarding my business practices." Catherine met her father's gaze steadily. "He did. He claimed his father died in a barn fire arranged by your men when he refused to sell his land for the railroad." Turner's face tightened. "Preposterous. I have never authorized or condoned violence to secure property." "But you don't deny wanting his land," Catherine pressed, "or that there was a fire that killed his father." "There was indeed a fire," Turner acknowledged after a moment. "A tragic accident that occurred during negotiations. The local authorities investigated and found no evidence of foul play." "Authorities who were on the railroad's payroll?" Wade asked quietly. Turner's cold gaze shifted to him. "I don't believe this concerns you, Mr. Parker." "It concerns Catherine," Wade replied evenly, "which makes it my concern as well." "And why is that exactly?" Turner's tone was dangerous. Catherine straightened her shoulders. "Because Wade and I intend to marry father." The silence that followed was absolute. Turner looked from his daughter to Wade and back again, disbelief giving way to controlled anger. "I see," he said finally. "And when was this decision made?" "Recently," Catherine replied, "but it is made and it is firm." Turner rose from his chair and walked to the window, his back to them. "You came west against my wishes, Catherine. You insisted on this teaching position when I had arranged an advantageous match in Boston. Now you inform me you intend to marry a—" He hesitated, searching for a word. "A frontier lawman you've known for mere weeks. Have you lost all sense of propriety?" "No, father," Catherine said calmly. "I've found my own sense of what matters. Wade is a good man, an honorable man. He risked his life to save mine without thought of reward or advantage. Can you say the same of the suitors you selected for me?" Turner turned, his expression grave. "You know nothing of the world, Catherine. Life here with him would be hard, lacking in all the comforts and opportunities you've known." "I know exactly what life here would be," Catherine countered. It would be honest work, clean air, and a husband who respects me as a partner rather than a possession. It would be the freedom to teach children who value education because they understand its scarcity. Wade watched the exchange with admiration for Catherine's composure. He had anticipated Turner's resistance, but was unprepared for the steel in the older man's manner. "Mr. Turner," Wade interjected, "I understand your concerns. I'm not a wealthy man and my home is modest compared to what Catherine has known. But I can provide for her comfortably, and I will spend my life ensuring she never regrets her choice." Turner studied him with calculating eyes. "Noble sentiments, Mr. Parker, but entirely irrelevant. My daughter will return to Boston with me when I leave next week." "No, father," Catherine said firmly. "I won't." "You are barely 23, Catherine," Turner reminded her. "Still under my legal authority. I am an adult woman," she interrupted, a hint of fire entering her voice. "With my own mind and my own heart. I came west to build my own life, and that is exactly what I intend to do with or without your blessing." Turner's face hardened. "If you persist in this foolishness, you do so without my support. No dowry, no inheritance, no connection to the Turner name or fortune." Catherine paled but didn't waver. "If that is your decision, I accept it." Wade stood, placing a supportive hand on Catherine's shoulder. "Mr. Turner, I understand your disappointment, but threatening Catherine won't change her mind. It will only ensure that you lose her entirely." "Is that truly what you want?" For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across Turner's face, a father's pain beneath the businessman's mask. But it was quickly suppressed. "I suggest you both leave," he said coldly. "I have business correspondence to attend to." Outside the hotel, Catherine trembled with the aftermath of the confrontation. Wade guided her to a bench in the small town square, sitting beside her in the shade of a young elm tree. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I never meant to come between you and your father." Catherine shook her head. "You didn't. This rift has been growing for years, since long before I met you. He cannot accept that I am not the biddable daughter he raised me to be. Still," Wade hesitated, "the loss of your inheritance is no small matter." Catherine looked at him directly. "Do you care about that?" "Not for myself," he assured her. "But for you, I don't want you to sacrifice more than you've considered." A small smile touched her lips. "Wade Parker, let me be perfectly clear. I would rather live in a one-room cabin with you than in a Boston mansion with a man I don't love. I would rather teach in a frontier schoolhouse than attend society functions as some banker's ornamental wife." Wade's heart swelled at her words. "Then we'll build a life together, however modest it may be." "It will be rich in all the ways that matter," Catherine replied, leaning against his shoulder. They sat together as the afternoon sun dappled through the elm leaves, discussing practical matters: when they would marry, where they would live, how Catherine would continue teaching. Despite Turner's rejection, there was joy in their planning, a shared vision of the future taking shape between them. The next day, Wade rode into town with a specific purpose in mind. He visited the small jeweler's shop on the edge of town, where he selected a ring not the most expensive in the case, but a lovely gold band set with a small diamond flanked by 2 garnets. It represented a significant portion of his savings, but as he tucked the small box into his vest pocket, he felt only satisfaction. That evening, as they walked along the stream that ran behind the schoolhouse, Wade formally asked Catherine to be his wife, going down on one knee as he'd seen Eastern gentlemen do in illustrations. Catherine's yes was immediate and joyful, her kiss sealing their engagement as the ring found its home on her finger. "It's beautiful," she said, admiring the way it caught the evening light. "The garnets reminded me of your hair," Wade admitted, a bit embarrassed by the sentimentality. Catherine touched his face gently. "Then I shall treasure it all the more." They agreed on a simple wedding in early August, after the summer school session ended. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Rock Springs, met with general approval and offers of help with the preparations. Even Mrs. Wilson, initial guardian of propriety, conceded that some courtships simply didn't require the usual lengthy observation period. In the days that followed, Catherine made several attempts to reconcile with her father, visiting him at the hotel and writing him notes when he refused to see her. Wade kept his distance from these efforts, understanding that this was between father and daughter. The night before Turner was scheduled to leave on the eastbound train, Catherine returned from her final attempt looking resigned but composed. "He still won't see reason," she told Wade as they sat in the boarding house parlor. "He says his decision is final if I marry you. I am no longer his daughter in any way that matters." Wade took her hands in his. "Are you certain this is what you want? There's still time to change your mind." Catherine's gaze was unwavering. "I have never been more certain of anything." "I love you, Wade. I choose you and our life together." "Then we'll face whatever comes together," he promised. The following morning, Wade accompanied Catherine to the train station to see her father off. Turner emerged from the hotel precisely on schedule, his luggage carried by a porter. He walked past them without acknowledgement, heading straight for the waiting train. "Father," Catherine called, stepping forward, "please don't leave like this." Turner paused, turning slowly. His face was composed, but Wade thought he detected a flicker of pain in the older man's eyes. "You've made your choice, Catherine," he said stiffly. "Yes, I have," she agreed. "But that doesn't erase our years together or the fact that you are my father. I would not have us part as strangers." Turner hesitated, glancing at Wade with thinly veiled hostility before returning his gaze to his daughter. "What would you have me say? That I approve of this arrangement? I do not." "I don't need your approval," Catherine said gently. "Just your understanding that this is my life to live." A whistle blew, signaling the train's imminent departure. Turner's jaw worked as if he were struggling with words he couldn't quite bring himself to speak. Finally, he reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. "This contains the deed to a small property outside town, 10 acres with a modest house. I purchased it yesterday. Consider it a wedding gift." Catherine stared at the envelope, then at her father, astonishment clear on her face. "Father, I cannot give you my blessing," Turner interrupted. "But neither can I leave my only child without some security." His gaze shifted to Wade, harder now. "If you truly love her, Mr. Parker, you will ensure she never regrets her choice." Wade met the older man's eyes steadily. "On that, sir, we are in complete agreement." Turner nodded once, then turned and boarded the train without another word. Catherine stood motionless, the envelope clutched in her hand, watching as the train pulled away from the station. "He does love you," Wade said quietly as the last car disappeared around the bend. "In his own way." Catherine nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "Yes, just not enough to accept the path I've chosen." She looked down at the envelope, then back at Wade. "Shall we go see this property?" The 10 acres proved to be about 2 miles outside town, good land with a clear stream running through it. The house was indeed modest, but solidly built, with 4 rooms and a front porch that caught the afternoon sun. It stood halfway between Wade's ranch and the town, a perfect compromise that would allow Catherine to continue teaching while they built their life together. "It's perfect," she said as they stood in what would be their front yard. "A fresh start for both of us." Wade put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "A home to build our future in." The weeks before the wedding passed in a flurry of preparation. Wade arranged to sell his bachelor cabin to a newly arrived cowhand, using the money to purchase additional cattle for their expanded property. Catherine finished the summer school session and prepared for the fall term, while also learning the domestic skills she'd never needed in her father's house with its staff of servants. The wedding took place on the first Saturday in August, a perfect summer day with clear skies and a gentle breeze. The small church was filled to capacity with townspeople who had come to witness the union of their schoolteacher and the respected former lawman. Sheriff Doyle stood as Wade's best man, while Mrs. Wilson, who had become something of a surrogate mother to Catherine, attended the bride. Catherine was radiant in a simple white dress, carrying wildflowers gathered that morning. As she walked down the aisle toward Wade, he felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly took his breath away. This remarkable woman, intelligent, compassionate, strong, had chosen him, had fought for their future together. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows spoken clearly for all to hear. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the congregation seemed to lift the church roof. Wade kissed his bride with restrained tenderness, mindful of the public setting, but the promise in his eyes spoke of more intimate moments to come. The celebration continued at their new home, where tables had been set up in the yard and the women of Rock Springs had prepared a feast. Children played between the trees, men gathered to discuss the upcoming harvest, and ladies exchanged recipes and gossip. Through it all, Wade and Catherine moved as a unit, hands often finding each other, eyes meeting across the yard in private communication. As evening approached and guests began to depart, Sheriff Doyle pulled Wade aside. "Got something for you," he said, handing over an official-looking document. Wade unfolded it to find a commission from the territorial governor, offering him the position of marshal for the Rock Springs district. "Tom, I don't know what to say," he began. Doyle waved off his hesitation. "Just think about it. Territory needs good men, Wade. Men who know the law but also understand justice. And the pay's better than ranching, especially with a family to consider." Wade glanced across the yard to where Catherine was thanking the last departing guests. "I'll discuss it with my wife," he said, the words still new and wonderful on his tongue. Later, as twilight deepened into night and they stood alone on the porch of their new home, Wade showed Catherine the commission. "What do you think?" he asked after she'd read it. Catherine considered the question carefully. "I think you were born to help people, to protect those who can't protect themselves. The badge would just make official what you already are." "It would mean some risk," Wade cautioned. "Some time away from home." "I understand that," she replied. "But I wouldn't ask you to be less than who you are just to keep you by my side every moment. We'll find our balance together." Wade pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed by the understanding in her words. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured against her hair. Catherine smiled up at him. "I believe luck had very little to do with it. You rode into dangerous country to save a woman you'd never met. That speaks to character, not fortune." "Still," Wade insisted, "finding you feels like the greatest blessing of my life." "Then we are blessed together," Catherine replied, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. They stood on the porch of their new home as stars appeared in the Wyoming sky, the future stretching before them not without challenges, but rich with promise. Wade thought briefly of Hannah, sending a silent thanks to her for the love they had shared and the strength it had given him to open his heart again. Catherine seemed to sense his thoughts. "She would be happy for you," she said softly. "For us?" Wade nodded, drawing Catherine closer. "Yes, she would." The night wrapped around them, the first of many they would share in this house, in this life they had chosen together. From an unlikely beginning, Outlaws, a stagecoach, A dangerous rescue had grown a love strong enough to overcome all obstacles. Not the end of their story, Wade knew, but the true beginning. Epilogue. 5 years later, Wade stood on the front porch of their expanded home, watching as Catherine led their 3-year-old son Thomas around the garden, pointing out butterflies and naming flowers. Their infant daughter Sarah slept in a cradle beside him, her tiny features peaceful in the afternoon sun. Rock Springs had grown significantly in those 5 years, the railroad bringing ever more settlers and opportunities. Wade had accepted the marshal's position, bringing law and stability to a growing region while still maintaining their small ranch with hired help. Catherine continued teaching until Thomas's birth, and now divided her time between motherhood and serving on the expanded school board. They had built a good life together, not without hardships, but filled with love, respect, and shared purpose. Their home had become a gathering place for the community, particularly on holidays when Catherine insisted on opening their doors to any who lacked family nearby. Once a year, a letter arrived from Boston, along with gifts for the children. Henry Turner had never visited, nor had he directly acknowledged his grandchildren. But the correspondence, stiff and formal though it was, represented a tenuous connection neither Wade nor Catherine wished to sever entirely. Perhaps someday, when wounds had fully healed and pride had softened, there might be reconciliation. Catherine looked up from the garden, catching Wade's eye across the yard. Her smile, as always, kindled warmth within him. She whispered something to Thomas, who immediately ran toward the porch with childish enthusiasm. "Papa," the boy called, reaching Wade's side and tugging at his hand. "Mama says to tell you supper's almost ready, and Uncle Tom and Aunt Martha will be here soon." Wade ruffled his son's dark hair. "Thank you, Deputy Thomas. Mission accomplished." The boy beamed at the title before racing back to his mother, energy seemingly inexhaustible. Wade watched them with a contentment that still sometimes surprised him, the depth of his love for this family they had created together. Catherine joined him on the porch, slipping her arm around his waist. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" she asked. Wade smiled down at her. "Just counting my blessings." "And how many have you counted so far?" she teased, her eyes bright with the same love that had captured his heart that day in the cave. "Too many to number," he replied honestly, "but they all begin with you." Catherine rose on tiptoes to kiss him, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over their years together. "And mine with you, my brave marshal who brought me home." Together they stood on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the life they had chosen, as the Wyoming sun began its descent toward the distant mountains. Not an ending, but a continuing of love discovered in the most unlikely circumstances, and nurtured through courage, commitment, and the daily choice to face whatever came together.